So let me call to order the South Burlington City Council meeting of Monday, February 6th, 2023, not 1923. And the first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So instructions on exiting the building in case of emergency.
Sure. Thank you for those who are joining us in the room. If there's an emergency, you can go out either of the doors at the back of the auditorium and turn left and right, or left or right to exit the building. For those participating remotely, thank you for joining us. If you would like to speak on any item on the agenda, please turn your camera on and the chair will recognize you. You can also message me in the chat and I will have the chair call on you. We are not monitoring the chat for content. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 3 is agenda review. Excuse me. Are there any additions, deletions, or changes in order of the agenda items? Okay. Tom isn't on yet. Okay. So seeing none, we'll move on to comments and questions from the public not related to the agenda. Please, welcome. Why don't you go up and make sure the light, you turn it on and the green light is very bright green. Well, I know the feeling. It's okay. My God, you're 2 minutes late.
Okay, my name is Kevin Donahue, resident here at South Burlington. It's been a while, but been meaning to get over here. Actually, once we get back from COVID, and my topic I'd like to inquire about is the solid waste districts operating the drop-off centers. What has gone on since COVID began when they originally closed it? I remember seeing the sign. They closed the facilities during COVID early on in March of that year. What was that, 2020, going back?
Right.
For what was called, it was kind of, I found it kind of humorous, a deep cleaning of the drop-off center. When they reopened, services were cut dramatically. I don't know whether they were still using COVID as an excuse, but you could no longer bring brush. And I'm going to speak about the Patchen Road drop-off center. You couldn't bring any brush over there that had any like wood to it. Everything had to be a leafy type of drop-off. Go forward to Christmas, you couldn't bring a Christmas tree over there. All your Christmas trees had to be either brought to the McNeil plant or you had to go to Williston. Couldn't bring appliances. Used to be able to bring, somebody wanted to bring their refrigerator after it crapped out, could bring it over to the drop-off center, and then the solid waste district would send a truck over there once a month or whatever, and they would haul them all away to wherever they took them. So mattresses, bedding, a whole bunch of things that can no longer be dropped off at the drop-off centers that have to now be sent to Williston or some other facility. So I want to go back to what I remember the drop-off centers were originally set up for, was to avoid a city or town with, say, 10,000 people, 15, 20,000 people, all running around to bring their things to drop them off. You bring them to a central location like Patchen Road, and then the solid waste district would take care of moving them. We, according to Kevin Dawn, when Kevin and I spoke of this back when he was still manager, they pay us, the city, $1 a year for the use of that space. And our services have been cut, to me, about 75% of what they used to be able to accommodate the city residents for. So to me, I think it should be looked into. Mm-hmm. I know when I talked to Kevin, unfortunately, I believe another contract had been signed. I don't know how long these contracts are for. I don't know whether anybody really read the fine print or whether they agreed to have all these services cut from the residents, but it needs to be looked into because the whole scope and meaning of what that district was set up for is now completely changed. They're not serving us anymore, they serve themselves. They make millions of dollars. I remember watching late night on public access one time. They had a board meeting. They didn't know what to do with the money. They were literally had a joke about it, that we have so much money we don't know where to invest it. And I think we're not being served anymore. So that's that. And if I have just time to speak about one other quick item, it's back to paving. And it kind of relates to this $15 million pedestrian bridge we want to. We have money to, and I understand some of it's a grant and all the rest of this, but we seem to have money for these projects that are, to me, a luxury, you know, in wants, and are they really needs? And we have roads crumbling. If you come up to our street, about 5 years ago, they paved the front side of our street on Pinnacle Drive. The back side of that street hasn't been paved since the development was initially done, and that's almost 30 years ago. There are holes back there. They come and do a little patchwork quilt thing on there, drop a little cold patch once in a while. But the street in the back, you should take a ride around the back. It's in really bad shape. It doesn't deserve to be that way. It shouldn't be that way. And it should have been paved about when the front was done. I don't know why it wasn't.
Have you alerted Public Works?
I've talked to Public Works, yeah. I think Tom DePietro indicated that Pinnacle was not on the agenda until probably 2024 or 2025 to get that backside done. And if I remember going back, some of you may have been on the board that was held over at, the meeting was held over at the, on Patchen Road. And that's when Justin gave a presentation that indicated that roads need to be paved within 15 years, or you have to pretty much rip them, you know, the whole surface of the road off and redo it. And they shouldn't get to that point. Now they're at that point. And now he's gone, and but you know, 30 years is now double what he's saying. It would have been a maximum. You should let any of these roads go. So I'd rather find money, and we've never really tried to get a bond through. You know, I've brought auto parts in here because we spend more money on our cars fixing them from these roads than we do, you know, any kind of bond that you would put before the residents. So that's it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry we didn't hear from Kevin before we had the annual presentation on the solid waste district. Didn't we have one recently? Yeah. Oh, you know, it would have been nice, because I don't know the answers to those questions, and we probably should find out.
Yeah, I'm happy to look into that. Report back.
I have my own
Both of
complaint
those
that they changed, you know, Pine Street to compost only after the pandemic, and that services that whole area of Burlington in the south end, right? And so you can't take anything there. You can't take. You used to be able to take trash and get it weighed, appliances, furniture, and I mean it's still a functional area. I don't know whether it's a problem with Burlington about that land and what the plans are for the future or what, but it's to me it's a complete waste of a site that you can't bring your normal household trash to Pine Street because you've got so many people there.
They're only accepting compost?
They only accept compost, yeah.
Didn't know that.
Yeah, they changed the whole thing, so. I mean, it was closed during the pandemic too, so.
Okay, well, it'd be good to get answers to those questions.
Well, thank you.
Are there any other comments or questions from the public? You don't forget your glasses. How about online? Anyone online? Okay, seeing none, go to item 5. Counselors' announcements and reports on committee assignments and the city manager's report. Megan, do you have anything?
Well, I do attend the committees to which I'm a liaison, including the Affordable Housing and the Charter Review Committee. But as of now, there are no big announcements, but just continued serious work and good work. And yeah, some good suggestions I think will be coming forward.
Great. Matt,
Yeah.
you have a new person.
Yes, we do. And I really hope he comes in. He's, his name is, the Green Mountain Transit Authority is the committee that you've all assigned me to, or now I'm on their board. I haven't been on their board. And we have a new director, president, CEO, whatever his title is, named Clayton Clark. And you'll know him when he comes in the room because he's always wearing suspenders and a cowboy hat. But he's from Southern Vermont. I don't understand the look, but he is, he's an interesting and fascinating guy, and he's doing a fantastic job. Establishing some well-needed structure and organizational work that organization needs. So I'm very happy to be working with him. The information for the budget, which has been in the news, so let's just address it right now, which is two things. One is they've asked for 10% more, $600,000 from South Burlington, so they can meet their budget. That's the assessment. And for Chittenden County, we're talking about putting bus fares back for the urban routes, which, remember, when COVID happened, largely, but then it became something else for safety issue, bus drivers stopped collecting fares, and all bus rides were free. And then, thanks to the federal government, and thanks to the state government, funds came in to keep those fares free. There is an effort that says we should keep fares free in perpetuity and find a proper funding source, and that's a good conversation to have. But not having that funding, the GMTA board, of which I am on, has made a decision to move forward as if we are not going to get those funds from state government, and that in July 1 there will be fares for those riding in Chittenden County. Our assessment here, the total assessment, by the way, is $591,554. So there's that. I'm happy to answer any questions about that. And then the last piece I wanted to say is, this is my second to last meeting as a city councilor. You've asked me to serve on the GMTA board, which I'm happy to do and continue to do, but these are real decisions facing your budget. And if it's more appropriate for you to pick who's ever on the council on March 8th, to pick someone else to serve that role as your liaison board member representing South Burlington to GMTA, I happily resign and step down. I enjoy this work. I think it's important work, but I understand the need for you to have someone report back to you and tell you what's happening with our bus authority. So I just want to say that publicly, so there be any question about who should serve or who should not serve. If there's a city councilor that wants to serve, I would gladly step down and make the space for that person.
I would just note, I mean, given that all our meetings are on Zoom, I don't know what the council will decide, but if we opt to have you continue, since it's pretty easy to tune in for 5 minutes at the beginning of a meeting to bring us up to date and share information, I might ask your thoughts about doing that.
I'm happy to do that, and I'm happy to serve until you find someone that wants to serve that role. I don't think it should be unfilled. I think if I'm not
Yes, I
there,
would agree.
The alternate should attend these meetings because I think they're very important, or there should be an alternate opposed. And I think Tim is the alternate right now. No?
Maybe. I was.
I think you still are.
Are you not alternate?
You were at one point, right?
No.
No? What?
No, I was for one meeting, kind of the incoming, and then just the morning meetings just don't work with my teaching schedule.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It is a volunteer position. There is no stipend. Just let you know that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, thank you. Any other committees or anything? No? Tim?
Thank you. So I attended remotely part of the Planning Commission meeting last week, especially interested in the discussion about the H68 proposed legislation. So I listened to that for a while. I also then dialed in on Thursday to the Department of Public Services webinar on where does our electricity come from in New England, which was very educational for me, and It was a good slide deck. I'd like to have that deck, and that there was some chatter going on in the chat behind the scenes. So I picked up on the fact that there's a really excellent webpage for ISO New England, and so of course we had a nice cold snap. And starting Friday night, I started looking very closely at the temperature map across New England, and then looking at the the load across New England, right, on all their charts, and then looking at the resource mix, right. So the interesting thing was a Saturday morning, everybody was below zero, right? Friday night, the amount of oil being used was very small, right? But by Saturday morning, 30% of all the power in New England was being generated from burning oil. Next was natural gas, then nuclear, then some hydro. Renewables is very small because the demand was so high. And I think at its peak, the peak price being paid was $143 per megawatt hour. Maybe it was $700 per megawatt hour. But it started out at $46 Friday morning, and it went all the way up to like almost $800 when it reached the peak. And so the formula, the way that's done is there's a little auction that goes on in the background. I didn't get all the details, but I'm fascinated by this, and I've been communicating with some people. And so in addition, I noticed that the power went out along Heinsberg Road on Saturday morning, and I'm driving around not seeing any plumes of steam coming out of people's chimneys. And so I emailed Green Mountain Power, and they said that a tree branch fell down on some lines on Heinsberg Road. Now, they said that outage was only an hour and a half. Is that about right? So City Hall was without power as well, right? Is that true? It looked like the whole block in between Kennedy, Williston Road, Heinsberg Road, and
Dorset.
Dorset was all out. But I don't know if it affected here or not.
I think it did affect here briefly, but we had generator power backup.
Oh, good.
But it is what I think led to the fire alarm going off here on
Oh.
Saturday and caused to evacuate the library during open hours on Saturday, which was not ideal on a very cold day. But it was out we had I hadn't, but the team who was here had started conversations about opening a warming shelter, but in conversations with GMT, we knew it was going to be back on really quickly, and it wouldn't cause the need for that.
Well, I'm glad it came back on pretty quick. I was just concerned about, there were like 1,349 homes which were without power for a significant amount of time during a below zero weather system. So anyway, glad it was short.
Well,
That's all.
just to piggyback, we have one room, a pretty large room in our house that uses a heat pump. And it was the warmest room in our house the entire cold snap. So when people say, oh, they don't work when it's really, really cold, ours did really nicely. Our furnace didn't, but that did. So just to let you know that it worked. 'Cause I was wondering, my husband and I were both wondering, is this, not going to produce heat when it gets really, really cold? And it did.
I think a lot of people suffered from some frozen pipes, including the Islamic Society of Vermont. They had a frozen pipe that burst and had some water event, unfortunately. But these types of stresses help to identify these situations, and hopefully homeowners and building owners can take the time to go in and re-insulate and seal up stuff, and then make sure areas stay warm during cold snaps like that. So.
Great. Well, I've had several airport commission meetings, so I have a number of things that I think the council and the public might be interested in. One of the questions I asked was about the hotel, because they've been working on that, and they had their permits, and then they changed the spot, and then the FAA had some other additional thinking about the hotel. They have a new partner now, and it's still going to go forward, but they're not certain when, but it's not a dead development. Shelby Lucier is leaving, and she was in charge of operations, and she was great. And I'm they're very sad that she has left. I think in part, well, I don't know why. She didn't explain why, but during the pandemic, there were some retirements, and the management and Nick, for example, was only the interim director, so he still was operations director, and then somebody left, and he had to take that work on, and people were really getting very,
Stressed.
kind of like here, where, you know, someone has to take in charge, and there isn't a person to give that to. So it was pretty intense for a while, and I think it will improve. I know it will. The fencing around the cemetery, they are getting a bid on that, and they hope it will go in, I think, in the spring. And by September, oh no, maybe it's by September. Then the final noise exposure map will be released to the public. Maybe that's in September. And
The final?
yeah, they did a second, you know, an updated noise map with the F-35 information. And they've had a number of public hearings and worked through that. So the new map will be available to the public.
Wasn't the last map an F-35 map?
Yeah, that's what I had. thought.
Well, it was only projected. This is the actual.
Okay.
And you have to have one, I think it's every 5 years or 10 years. So I think we had one, I think, done a little bit earlier.
We had
than
asked for one.
North, because we asked for one,
Yeah.
but this is the one that is in the sort of normal queue. And it has, you know, all the actual data from the F-35, and they're all here, so it's a little bit different than that one.
When were the hearings?
I don't know, because I didn't attend any.
We didn't get any word of hearings.
Well, maybe there weren't hearings, but they have done the map.
Okay. Okay.
Maybe the hearings will be when they present it and they share it, because it's
Okay.
not exactly, I mean, it's data-driven, so it's not as if in a public hearing, someone could say,
Sway
I
it.
don't think that line belongs there, so perhaps that's when.
Could you just double check?
I will
Okay.
check when that, exactly.
Will this affect the homes that may or may not have been selected for insulation?
They
or-
didn't think it would.
Okay.
In a preliminary look, they said the lines
Okay,
don't really change. And then, as a final goodwill message, I guess, or gift from Senator Leahy, he managed to get into the appropriations bill, $34 million that for the north redo of the airport. So I'm guessing he'll probably have his name on it or something, but I don't know if that's been decided yet.
So runways or?
No, of the actual terminal building.
Oh, okay.
And then, what else? There's one other thing. Oh, and we received the audit report, and there were no findings, good comments. The bottom line is very healthy.
Good.
So that's that. I don't know what else I did. I did other stuff, I can't remember. But that was the big stuff to share with you. City manager. Oh, I'm sorry. Did someone?
Tom Chandon is there.
Oh, okay. Tom, do you have anything to report?
Nothing to report, but thanks for asking.
Okay.
Yeah, Peter Taylor did have his camera on very shortly
But
while
I think
Matt
he
was
had just
giving.
arrived.
That could be it.
Yeah. Peter, you didn't want to make a comment on anything, did you? I guess not. Okay. City manager.
Great, thanks. I have quite a bit. It feels like a while since I've been at city updates. I was getting used to weekly meetings. So first and foremost, wanted to share that for the council and for the community, we have built a town meeting day website on our website where all the information, we're trying to centralize all the information for both city and school information, obviously linking to the city clerk's page for voting information. So if folks are looking for information on what is going to be on their ballot in March, the website is southburlingtonvt.gov/TMD, Town Meeting Day but just the acronym TMD 2023. So you can go there for all of that information. It also includes a listing of all the upcoming public information sessions. And we really would invite any of the counselors, I can share an email in more depth about this later, but if any of the counselors would like to attend any of those outreach sessions and help with the presentation, please do let me know. We would welcome your participation. Those are upcoming on February 8th at 12:30 at a senior center lunch. Valentine's Day, the hashtag Love Your City event to do with your sweetie before dinner at 6 o'clock on Valentine's Day, and then February 28th at 6 o'clock, and then obviously we'll have the pre-town meeting day event on March 6th. So hopefully folks will come and get educated about what is on the ballot. On that town meeting day 2023 link on our website is also the recording to the town meeting TV presentation we did last week. So if folks want to watch the presentation, they can also do that on that website.
Great.
So as you all have alluded to already, it was a very busy, cold and power outage weekend in the city. We've had a very busy few days of public safety issues. So as you talked about, there was the fire this morning at the in-construction home on Spear Street. Nobody was hurt. That was in addition to 32 calls for service they got on the 24-hour shift from Saturday into Sunday during that really cold snap. That's obviously a lot for one 24-hour shift. The PD also responded to 113 incidents over the weekend, many of those having to do, again, with cold and outages, and then, of course, the notice you all got about the stolen car event that damaged 2 of our police cars over the weekend.
Ugh.
Again, none of our police officers were hurt, but those 2 cruisers are currently out of service. And while we're on public safety for a minute, we had want to share a good highlight. In January, we had 10 direct referrals to our Community Justice Center. That's our police officers identifying subjects of crime and perpetrators and referring to community justice as opposed to going through the court system. That's in comparison to 1 referral we got from the court system. So 10 from our officers, 1 from the court system. And of those 10, 60 were resolved. 60% of them were resolved through that restorative process. The balance then gets referred on to the court system.
That's great.
So great work by our community justice staff, our volunteers who support that work, our neighbors who work on that restorative process. I just want to let the council know, Chief Locke and Chief Burke and I did attend an all PD staff meeting the week before last to talk about dispatch and our kind of parallel processes we're currently working to move forward with the Public Safety Authority, as well as explore options for us providing regional services. So more to come on that, and we had a really great conversation with some of the officers and dispatchers there. As I think the council is aware, and hopefully the community is aware, we are in the midst of a set of community conversations we are having over the next month and a half as we update our comprehensive plan. So there's a series of 8 different listening sessions. I think there are 8, maybe 10. There's 3 this week, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. They're all in 301 and available through GoToMeeting. And again, they're linked right off of our website. This week's conversations are about tomorrow night is jobs, business, and the economy. Wednesday night is energy and climate change. And Thursday night is the Northwest Neighborhoods meeting. So we encourage folks to attend, have their voices heard, again, in person or remotely. We are seeing huge success in our senior center. We are averaging about 55 folks for lunch every Wednesday and about 42 for bone builders every morning, which is great. Lots of folks coming in. We are looking for some senior center volunteers. So if anyone knows anyone who's looking to get involved, we would love to have some more volunteers helping with senior programming. And then just a couple more updates. The Dorset Street Signals project is kicking off this week. Our contractor will be there doing subsurface investigation over the next couple of weeks. So you may see during commuting times the lanes go down just to do a couple of borings. It won't be a long-term closure, but they are starting that work this week. Also want the council in your BCA roles to know our tax sale process is moving along. We had 44 properties go to tax sale. Of those, we're down to 7 remaining properties that are outstanding. We are in talks with all of those property owners around payment plans, full payment, whatnot. We really hope to come to that solution before a sale. But if a sale is necessary, that auction is set for March 16th. And we are, just a reminder to those folks and folks in the community, the VHAP program, which is the Vermont Assistance to Property Owners program as a result of COVID, is still out there and available. 5 of the properties that were on the tax sale list took advantage of that program and got their taxes fully up to date. So if folks are out there struggling, please VHAP, look up that program. It's a great benefit to the community. And then finally, I just want to invite the council. We are having a fire department recognition night on February 23rd to swear in several new firefighters and celebrate some recent promotions. I'll send some more details to your inboxes, but we would welcome you to join us for that event on February 23rd. I believe it's 6 o'clock, but I will send you details. Thank you very much.
Great. Well, thank you. I have one question. Yes.
So in the note from Chief Locke, he says that Officer Wilson was struck by his police cruiser as he was positioned outside of it attempting to stop the stolen car. Is he okay?
Yes, he is just fine.
Okay, thanks.
Well, that's good. Okay, let's move on then to item 6, the consent agenda, and there are 6 items. Disbursements, approval of minutes from January 3rd and January 17th. Approve an application for a community recovery and revitalization program grant to support the construction of additional water storage in the city's high service area. Approve the application and acceptance of an ARPA 2022 pre-treatment grant to complete an assessment of our industrial wastewater users. 5th, approve the annual certificate of highway mileage. And F, approve the FY22 TIF annual report.
So I move to approve, but I do have questions about the annual report, and ideally I would like to move that out, or else we can just ask questions as part of
The
our discussion
annual
of the TIF.
of the
fiscal year
TIF, so
20.
item F.
Yeah.
Okay, so why don't we move that out and we can approve the first 5
Second.
and then have a conversation on the TIF. Okay? Any further comment or question? Okay, all in favor? Oh, Tom, I'm not looking at the screen. You're okay?
I'm okay.
All right, so approval of A through E. All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Okay, now we'll move to F, the FY22 TIF annual report. And Councilor Emery has a question or two.
Yeah, I was just looking through the amount paid with TIF revenues, the amount paid with non-TIF revenues, and the total improvement expenditure for this report period. And there were just a couple of items that seemed, I'm just going to try and find it now, sorry. And it might have actually been, I'm sorry, the second one, sources of non-TIF revenues, total amount secured for each source, total amount spent to date.
What page?
It is, let's see, for
Or
our
what-
packages, it's 66 in our packet.
56?
Yeah.
66.
66, I thought you said.
66, I'm sorry.
56?
66.
Okay.
Oh, but this doesn't tell me.
So it's page 3 out of 8 on the bottom.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
I do want to preface this by saying Alana, I just texted her to see if she can jump on. She's got a really bad cold. So I will do
Yeah.
my best to answer questions, but we may need to table this.
Okay.
But go for it.
All right. It was the number 11, the Efficiency Vermont rebate. And I was really curious about the total amount secured for each source and then total amount spent to date. So if we've only secured 5,600, how can we spend 55,000? Or is that total amount secured for each source this year? And then the total amount is for all of the years?
Yeah, I can do that.
I'm pretty sure it's all of it.
I think it's a simple, hopefully a simple explanation, but
Yes, it is. The 56 that is on there, that was the initial payment that we received 2 years ago, but the 55 was received this year. So it's just an error in the formula that was in the spreadsheet that we completed.
okay.
So yes, the 55 is an actual amount that we actually receive from efficiency improvement.
Okay.
So is that a correction we need to make before we approve?
No, she said the
No.
55 is the accumulative, right?
No, 55 was the actual amount that we received in FY22, but the 5,600 that says secured was reported in the previous year.
Reported in a previous year.
So it was a previous error that's now
Correct.
updated.
Yes.
All right.
Oh, I see.
So
Okay.
the total amount secured would be the 55 plus the 5,600, which would be 61,600.
Okay. And then yeah, I guess it's just this is just annual. So this is now page 2 of 8 in the TIF report, under debt instruments. So we have the City Hall Senior Center Public Library. We have the principal of $5 million, the interest of $1 million plus. Is that just in 1 year? That's just this year. I just wanted to understand exactly how.
No, that's the overall interest that would be paid on the 5 million bond.
Throughout the whole, isn't it 20-year period?
Yes. I think
Okay.
it was less than 20 years.
And we are only paying $5 million over 20 years? That can't.
No, 5 million was the total amount of bond that we took out.
Oh, just
But
the
1
bond.
million is the interest on that. So the total principal plus interest on the bond is the 6 million.
And that's just the TIF portion of the debt for this building. There's then non-TIF debt on this building as well.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. All
Sorry,
right.
yes,
I would
that's correct.
assume that it was yes.
So this building is much more than $5 million.
That's
Yeah, because let's
I
build
just-
another library or something, or a,
Yeah, it's
You
that
know,
we're only
some-
reporting here
something else for
what's
5 million.
eligible for
Only-
TIF reimbursement.
Thank you. I think those are my 2 questions. So
Okay.
I'm willing now to move that we approve the fiscal year 2022 TIF annual report.
Second,
any discussion?
when is the audit?
The TIF audit?
Yeah.
With the state auditor?
Yeah.
It is currently underway.
Underway. Okay.
Yes.
And Burlington just had theirs and found some discrepancies that are being taken care of.
Found some discrepancies. If we find discrepancies, we will happily correct them, but we are confident in our management of our TIF district.
We are confident.
Yes.
That's all.
Can I ask you a question? About
Sure.
why just the numbering? Why is the numbering the way it is? 2, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10, 12.
Instead of a 3 and a 7 being an 11.
I believe those, my understanding, Martha, correct me if you have a different understanding, is when in our original TIF application, we had a number of projects, public projects that were
Right.
authorized by VEPSI. When we did our what do they call it? Substantial change requests last year. Some of those projects we took out, but we have to still report on them to line them up for the state reporting.
Okay.
Call the vote.
So, all in favor of approving this TIF annual report, say aye.
Aye.
And we'll move on then to number 7, receiving a presentation from the Sextons Committee and provide direction to the staff or take an action. Please make sure the little green light is nice and bright and the mic is relatively close to your mouth. Thank you.
Hi, Donna Kinville, City Clerk and Chair of the Sextons.
And Maureen O'Brien, Secretary of the Sextons.
And we have Peter Taylor online, who is, again, he's home under the weather. So, oops, sorry, my computer's acting.
COVID. I don't mind if everybody knows.
Okay, thanks, Peter.
Doing well.
He's blaming Marta for it, but, thank you. I was wondering when my computer changed. So we're here before you tonight. We were here not that long ago, but there are a couple of things that we've been kind of working on. And at our last presentation, we discussed about the possibility of raising the cost of the lots. And we'll get into that in a little bit as well. So as you know, because you have all helped us at some point during our cemetery work, we have really been working hard to make our cemeteries, get them up to an acceptable level. And these cemeteries for many, many years really had no intention other than our highway department mowing. And they did a fantastic job. But really, the cemeteries were really forgotten for a long, long time. And as sextons, our role is also very limited by statute. So, and most of everything else is I think of the word, is statute, but as the cemetery commission. So, all decisions on cemeteries are made by the cemetery commission. We have kind of gone above and beyond what sextons do, and we've looked at some things. We've kind of come up with a draft of rules and regs on, you know, what should be acceptable in it, and sorry. So, you know, we're just going through this process. We're doing a lot. And therefore, in order for us to keep moving in a positive direction, we're asking for the council to consider making the sextons the cemetery commissioners so that we can move forward and make some decisions without having to come to you in your very busy schedule and say, hey, we've got these rules and regs. Could you please review them and approve them? So we're kind of looking for that authority to do that kind of work on ourselves. And if for some reason that you are not comfortable giving up that role, then if there's some way you could expand through a resolution or something, expand our role a little bit so we can do a little bit more. We've kind of almost gotten to the point where as sextons we really can't do much else other than, you know, continue to clean and take care of some of the cemeteries. But they need more attention than the sexton's title can give. So,
Is this something that exists in other municipalities, a commission? Is there a model for it?
Yep. State statute says that if there's a cemetery, there shall be a cemetery commission that oversees it. So therefore, the council, select board, the governing body of the municipality would appoint somebody to be the cemetery commission. And by statute, failure to appoint people to be the commissioner, the cemetery commission, in effect makes that governing body the cemetery commission.
Donna, you might want to pull that slide up.
Yeah, I trying to see if I can. Yep, there. Well, no, this is the. Well, first of all, can we get back to that one then? Because this next slide is really kind of. We're here two reasons: one for the cemetery commissioners and one for the lot sizes. So
lot sizes, we compared our lot sizes and prices with a number of the surrounding communities and found that we were very inexpensive. But also, I think because of the condition of the cemeteries, we weren't selling any lots. So we did the research and we are proposing to have $500 for residents and $700 for non-residents, and keeping the lot size pretty much the same, 3.5 by 10 feet. And as we show on the slide, Burlington is charging $700 for residents and $1,200 for non-residents. Essex's website, which we haven't checked in probably 6 months, was $600 for residents. The other item to consider is, you know, for cremations. You know, obviously you don't need a whole entire lot for a cremation. So do we want to reduce the size and possibly sell cremation lots? So these are just something we would have to come back to you guys for consideration, you know, when we get farther down the this road. So.
And right now, when someone pays for a lot, they reserve it ahead of time.
correct.
Or
Could
buy
be.
it because they need it with a loved one. Where does that money go? Who manages it? And what does it pay for?
Currently now, there is a special fund sitting in the city books.
Okay.
So every lot sale goes to that, but it comes with perpetual care. So which means that $500 that someone is paying is for the lot, but it's also for the care and the maintenance as well of it. So that price has been on our books for, I think about 10 years was the last time we had a price increase in the cemetery lots. So it sits in the city coffers as a special fund. Tom Hubbard started a couple of years ago, and Tom Chittenden knows this, that we were able to get the city to start putting a little bit of money into this fund so we could start doing some things that we need to do to get them back up to a certain level. And I think we're down to, I think we have $1,000 a year that we put into, the city puts into the cemetery fund to help us with the maintenance. I mean, we're talking, we've probably got 13,000 in it. We're not talking it's a huge slush
Right.
fund.
And so the maintenance is more than just mowing.
Correct.
It would be what, keeping the headstones straight, cleaning them?
Cleaning them,
The
keep cutting back
fence?
the the brush that keeps kind of
Okay.
creeping in from the sides. Fence repair, you know,
Okay.
all that kind of.
And there was some talk about having an agreement with, the restaurant next door for parking. Is that?
They've been very open to us parking there. It doesn't matter to them. And actually, my husband's been down there quite a bit, doing a lot of trimming all around that particular cemetery, and he's noticed that not the restaurant, the guys who plow the restaurant parking lot are pretty good. They'll kind of keep the snow away from the fence, where the car dealership on the other side, on the other hand, has pushed the fence pretty much right over. So that's
Is that something they can fix?
well, but I don't think it's up to my husband to call.
Oh,
no. We're
Right, yes,
asking-
exactly. That was a segue to, if
We'll
somebody
have
from the
Matt take
city-
care of that.
Could I ask a couple of real basic questions? So the fund to maintain the cemeteries comes out of the Sexton's budget, doesn't come out of Public Works. Public Works is not.
Public Works does mow the lawns, but I don't think they
And the
get,
cemetery fund does not
Doesn't
get
pay them,
charged for
that's
that.
just-
Contract or for what?
No.
for what-
No.
No, for a private,
It's
no,
like-
it's all volunteers?
Well, no,
No, no,
volunteer,
no,
it comes
no.
out of their
If I-
public works budget.
Oh, okay. But any other,
If I can just add in, Public Works also has helped us with removal of the trimmings we've done. And so they do some yard work, if you will, but most of the yard work we've done recently has been volunteer.
there was a number of trees that fell down at Eldridge during that windstorm a couple weeks ago. And we happened to notice it. And anyway, Public Works came over, within a week and took care of all the debris and that
that's
stuff.
great.
Yeah.
And
Thank you
the
for
last
The
checking
fund
on
basic
them.
also,
Yeah.
the fund also purchased materials for the stone cleaning and the days we did those stone cleanings. So they funded that fund funded that activity.
So just to clarify, the fund comes from the prices, and it's managed by the Sextons, not the council.
It is managed by the city.
It is managed by the city, and then of course the fees are decided by the council.
Yes.
Okay.
What's the balance right now?
She said
13,000 about?
About 13,000.
So do we need to follow up with the auto dealer on the fence?
That would be nice.
Okay.
His name is.
A quick question.
Yes.
Have you thought about erecting a columbarium?
A what?
We did look into that, and the cost was,
It's a locker for cremated remains.
Oh.
Yeah.
we were thinking about that, especially for Shelburne Road, since
Ye-
that might be a better place.
Yeah.
The cost was very,
There'd be a capital cost there.
yeah, yes.
Right, right. But since, the last memorial service I went to, I asked the funeral directors what the ratio was
Oh.
of cremation to non-cremation. It's 80%
I know.
cremation right now.
Yeah.
So there's a lot less interest in full-size burial plots. I think that's the change that's going on right now.
Mhm.
So. Burlington has a columbarium at Lakeview.
Yeah.
It's small, but they'll probably end up having to add more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's one over, Resurrection Park has one too.
And what was
We
the
can
price?
come,
600.
we can come back to the council with pricing on one of those if you'd like. But that'd be something I think the Sextons, if they were the cemetery commission, would try to do if they had it in the budget. If not, they'd have to go to the council and ask for additional funds. But those are the kinds of things we would work on.
Yeah, it's definitely more than we have in our current budget. You have to have a cement pad and, it was a lot.
Okay. So, and then with this change to becoming a commission, we would still appoint the members?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay, just like it, like the planning commission or whatever, okay.
Right.
And then, would the commission,
We appoint or we elect, the voters elect. It says the town has voted to elect
Should we
cemetery.
do the next ones?
Is it?
elected, does that mean like they've selected to do that? Like we elect to have blue and gray as our high school colors?
Oh, unless the town has voted to elect. So we have not voted to elect in the history of South Burlington. They've never held
An election.
an election to elect their cemetery commission, like me, like they're
Nobody's
not on the
running,
ballot.
nobody's running for the office for
So
cemetery.
is truly under the governing board to appoint who they would wish to serve.
Okay. And then if we do that, would you then be able to determine the costs of plots? Or is that something that you would come back to us to recommend and the council approve? I'm just curious. I don't have any strong feelings about it, but.
Yeah. I would imagine it would be the city council's decision. I mean, we make recommendations.
Okay.
And we can kind of go through and kind of do the day-to-day work kind of thing.
Okay.
But when it comes to the money issues and the bigger things, I think that's outside the commission's duties.
Okay.
We're,
Do you
we're
know of
working
other-
on our rules and regulations right now, and they're actually with Colin McNeil, the city attorney, being reviewed, and there's a lot of language in there that's confusing because it refers to the cemetery commission, which is the de facto city council, and there's a lot of things that the cemetery commission has to do, but we don't necessarily think it should be you guys, because you guys all
We don't think you want to sell lots or
Yeah.
go visit people out
go
at the
show
cemetery.
a person a lot at 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning or Friday morning to sell the lots.
Oh, we'll
So-
have Jesse do that.
Okay. And we don't have the power to delegate? I mean,
Well, that was the question. If you don't want to make us the cemetery commission, you still wish to hold on to that title, you could delegate us more responsibility.
Right. So that's the,
But as
Option.
sections what we have right now, really, we're just for the care of the cemetery, and that's about it.
Okay.
So we've really kind of overstepped a lot of,
do you have a
Whatever else.
model in mind that you would like to, I don't know, it just seems to be something that we would establish in terms of the structure?
it's, every place is so different.
Every place is so different. So it is up to us to structure it. So the finances would come to the council, would be perhaps one stipulation. The rest-
Well, it says current work in progress, approving rules and regulations. They're awaiting feedback from the city attorney.
Mm.
So perhaps when the city attorney has completed that, or do we need to ask him to do that or direct him to?
He's
doing
working
it.
on it.
He's working on it.
Yeah.
Then we could see, because those would be the rules and regulations to potentially create this cemetery commission of not the city council, but this other commission.
well, the rules and regs we gave Mr. McNeil is all has to do with the care of the cemeteries, the sale of the lots, who goes out and meets with the person, who collects the money, who,
The deeds.
the deed, creating a deed and having the deeds written. So it's all that, it is technically the on the boots on the ground kind of work, which I think is what the commission would do. Anything above that, management-wise, would be the city council. So payments got made out of the cemetery fund, it goes before the council to approve. If we needed to raise funds, we need to do something, or we would come to the council.
Could I mention when the council gets the proposed rules after we develop those and Colin looks them over? When you read that, I think you'll get a better perspective of what is expected out of the commission and out of the sextons or the people in charge of the cemeteries. So maybe at that time it might help you as you look at what the commission could or should do separate from the council.
Okay, well, I'm happy to wait for that report and make a decision. I think you're kind of moving in the right direction.
So just, there's two decisions we were looking
Right, the
for today.
price, I'm
price.
in favor of increasing the price.
Yes, me too.
And to get the feedback from Colin about the proposed rules and regulations, and then
And what-
hopefully, it sounds like that will clarify what we're gonna call this.
And in the rules and regs that we gave Colin, we left a lot of who's responsible for what out, because it is a lot. There's a lot of steps from the time someone's first interested in purchasing a lot, into all the record keeping and everything else in between, to the actual burial and arranging with the funeral home. There's a lot of steps in between. So I said, it's a lot of the boots on the ground. It is truly, how does one go from step A to the end? So there's a lot of work. So we left a lot of who was responsible for it out, because not showing who was council, who was commission, who's sextons, who's a clerk. A lot of times I want to put a lot on the clerk's office. I'm
Well,
like,
you did all this, right?
what was
But
that?
she does do all this now,
Yeah,
but it's
that's
not in
why
her
you're
job
retiring.
description.
One of the reasons.
So that was the other concern. If Donna's no longer going to be the city clerk, I mean, she still wants to be on the cemetery commission, but we'll have to find somebody within the city clerk's office to handle the money and handle the deeds. And
So is it kind of separating what is the clerk's duties and what is just mine as a sexton? I've kind of lumped them all. We kind of need to separate them some.
Okay.
just put that on your radar.
But I just want to point out at Shelburne Road, that this shot that you have there, if you look, there's that brown spot underneath. That was where that cemetery stone had been laying
Oh,
on both of those. So that is the kind of work we have done. I mean, we've taken something that was completely buried in the ground, covered up,
Broken.
broken, and stood it up, cleaned it off, and made it legible again, I
Yeah,
guess.
not brand new, but certainly
Yeah.
in
So
an honorable.
yes,
So
Jesse.
I think this is a great overview presentation. I think all of these steps that are being outlined are multi-stage steps. I think in order to set fees, we need to bring you a resolution with fees included. I think in order to appoint the sextons as the cemetery commission, we need to figure out the legislative process to do that. I think Colin's only had this for a few days. I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done before you guys are ready to vote on anything. Didn't you all talk about this on Wednesday at your cemetery commission meeting? I haven't seen this until today.
Did we talk about
No,
I'm
Wednesday
sorry.
we just went over the slides.
to get ready for today?
Yeah, that's all.
Have
Wednesday.
we asked, when did we ask Colin for the legal opinion about creating the cemetery commission?
We have not.
Okay, so we have a lot of background work to
Okay.
do before you guys are ready to vote on anything.
Yeah,
But I think this is a great overview presentation of like what are the work steps we need to do, you all and staff, in order to get there.
Okay.
And we have one more addition to this, and that
Oh.
is the
Art project?
the art project.
We got approached, and there's been some conversation about Shelburne Road Cemetery and how does it fit into the comprehensive plan, and how do we draw attention to the cemetery? It's a nice city-owned piece of land in the middle of Shelburne Road. It is currently by deed to be only used as a cemetery. but we were approached to have this permanent art display in front of the Shelburne Road Cemetery. So they're looking for approval. And although we do want to draw attention, and good, we're just sextons, it's not our decision, is, you know, we're kind of, is the permanent thing that I think that kind of scares us, is because if it is permanent, we don't know what the future has. I mean, we only have these 2 lots for cemetery plots for sales. There is no other land dedicated in the city for it, so I would hate to make a permanent art project knowing that when time is needed for the area that the art project is on, it need to be moved, and we would then be able to have those lots for sale. So it's the permanency, I think, that kind of gets us.
So I talked to a member of the Public Art Committee about this, and the question is it's not inside of the fence. It's
There is
outside
no-
of the fence.
There's no fence
Well,
on the front.
the entrance. It's
Yeah.
out. It's closer to the road, and even the question was, isn't it in the city's right of way? Do you know the answer to that? Outside of that entrance, what
I wouldn't think
cities-
so. I mean, it can't be more than the 60,
Yeah.
the average one, which would be the sidewalk, which would have been right there. But they're talking, they actually want to put it right, that's another thing, they want to put it right back by the tree line. And they said it'd be a nice, good backdrop for it. That goes against everything. As us as sextons, we're trying to open that up to stop the vagrants from people from being in the back and having the parties and hanging out and,
Just bring more notice to the cemetery.
yeah. So it kind of goes against what we're kind of working on. It doesn't. We want people to come to the cemetery. We want to draw attention to it, but we also don't want the back section of it to be secluded off from the front.
Okay, because the member of the Public Art Committee's understanding was that it would be closer to the road. It would not be hidden or.
Yeah, no, I don't think it would be hidden. It would just be back, like instead of being 20 feet from the road, they might, what we're understanding is that it might be 80 feet from the road. So
I thought it was closer to the tree
line. As
To the
opposed to
swale.
closer.
See, I think this is a decision that we need to decide who the commission is and what the rules are and the processes. And once that's established and we have, appointed that commission, if that's the road we go, then we can do a little more long-range planning for the cemetery. I mean, it occurs to me that if we really clean it up and make it look lovely, maybe it should be on the website. Maybe it is. I've never looked for our cemeteries. I didn't even know we had two
There is
till
some
fairly
mention of
recently.
it, but
But I mean, but if you have people knowledgeable about it, then they might use it and then they might go to it. And it isn't just land that's set aside for a cemetery, but it's never used.
it is, in my research, it is very unusual for a city of our size to only have as little cemetery, city-owned cemetery land as we do. And obviously not many people have chosen to get buried in either cemetery.
Well, we've got a couple other big ones, so.
Well, I'm just non-religious.
Right, I
Yeah.
understand that,
yeah.
but that's the other
Right.
alternative for many is to do a
True.
religious one.
Because I think Colchester has like 4 or 5 of them,
Yeah.
Yeah.
city-owned cemeteries.
Do they have
Oh.
a commission?
Mhm.
Separate from the select board and the council?
Okay. Well, I appreciate all the work you've done. Tom really got this started, so maybe he'll continue or come back to be a sexton or a commissioner to fulfill his dream or dreams.
My wife is not allowing me to join any boards or commissions without her explicit permission, so maybe.
Well,
I just want to point out that John Barrows has roped my brother-in-law into some extensive landscaping, and my brother-in-law was a professional landscaper, so there's some good talent working down there right now.
great.
Yeah, as soon as it warms up, I think
They're
you know,
going back tomorrow.
they're going back tomorrow. Yeah.
Oh, that's
Wow.
wonderful.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, one
I'm
more
sorry,
thing?
go ahead.
No, do we need to have a motion for the price increase?
Oh, I
need to do
think
that through a
we
resolution.
need to do that through a resolution.
Oh, okay,
So I think that will be part of the whole package of redesign and
okay.
regulation and processes that at some point we'll see. I think that's the cleanest.
Okay.
City Arts need a decision by any date? Does anybody know?
I didn't ask that question.
Yeah, I don't know. Okay.
Well, I, for one, am not ready to make that decision. I don't even know what it costs and,
It
I
was
mean,
a
I'm
10
not
it's a
necessarily.
$10,000 grant that I have no idea where it came
Oh.
from, but it was this group came to
Okay.
us.
Well, I still think, I mean, I guess we can find out when they lose the grant, when they need to, but I think it's a little
I think it's a great
premature
idea, I'm
right
just not
now
sure
for
that-
us to say, let's do that. At least that's my feeling.
Oh, we can't do it tonight. No.
That's fine.
What about the marketing plan? Do you have a marketing plan set up?
First, we have to figure out who's buried where and how many people are buried.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think Pete,
Peter, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I would just like to thank the chair for her diligence in getting the fence done.
Oh,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been a long time.
Oh,
I mean, at the airport, the
at the
Eldridge
airport, oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Cemetery.
Yeah.
Well, thank you then, Donna, for
Thanks.
staying on that.
Okay.
thank you, ladies.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to item 8, which is receiving and accepting the FY22 audit from RHR Smith,
And Miranda is here.
and Miranda McDonald will be presenting that. And Martha, are you part of this, or you're just, you were the part? You were a part. Are you going to be presenting, or?
No, I'm not
No.
presenting.
Okay.
Miranda is, but
All right, please come down. Yeah.
Oh, I'll do that, yep. I got it. Just stop sharing, click stop sharing on your computer, the screen, the button that says screen at the bottom. Yep. Can you pass that to Tim? There you go. Yep, got it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Donna.
so as Miranda is setting up, I just want to point the council and the audience to where the audit is. In the city council package included was just a memo, but toward the end of the memo, there is a link to the actual audit report, which was 125 pages. That's why we only included a link. And as stated in the memo, FY22 was the second year. We've actually ended with a huge amount of surplus, which the council actually funded a good number of specific projects, and those are also listed in the memo, when and the amount as well. And in the memo, actually, I think I had a typo in there where it said that the council was able to use the FY24 surplus fund. That is supposed to say FY22 surplus fund.
All right. Thank you, Martha. As she said, my name's Miranda McDonald. I come all the way from National Guard Avenue in South Burlington. So over by the airport. So far ways to drive. But it was a pleasure working on the South Burlington audit this year. Did not have to travel far, so I was excited. Usually one of the first questions we get was, what's the opinion of the audit? This can be found on page 1 in the second paragraph, where it says, in our opinion, the accompanying financial statements present fairly in all material respects. So what this means was it was a clean audit. We did not find anything materially wrong, causing us to restate. I'm going to highlight the management's discussion and analysis, which can be found on page 5 of the audit. This is a very good synopsis of what happened during the year. So if you're not going to read the full 125 pages of the audit, which, puts me to sleep, then at least read this summary so you get a good understanding, broad understanding of what happened during the year. The next big question we get is, what is our fund balance for general fund? This can be found, statement C, which is page 17 of the audit in the first column. So for FY22, your general fund balance ended with about $4.8 million. 2.5 of that is unassigned fund balance. This is in keeping with your fund balance policy of maintaining at least 8.3%, a minimum of 8.3%, which equates to about 1 month's operating expenditures. So you are in compliance. Your target for that fund balance is 2 months. You're not quite there yet, but I know you're working on it. The $1.9 million in assigned fund balance, that listing can actually be found, note 13, back in the audit, but about 1.2 million of that is assigned for the Dorset Street project. So that's what makes up the most of the assigned fund balance. The other funds are considered major funds in your books, the TIF district fund, and then you have a capital reserve fund as well that's listed here. The TIF district increased, their fund balance increased to about $59,000, and your capital improvement reserve fund decreased about $400,000. Zoom in.
Yeah, zoom in, please.
Yep.
Sorry. Keep going. That's good.
I can't scroll down now.
Can you
Sorry.
go to the sidebar? If you functions of the sidebar, the little tilde arrow on the middle of the page.
It says
I get that, but it's being blocked by the go-to meeting.
Okay. I'm sorry. Okay, no problem.
Yeah, let me see if I can.
No, it's fine.
Oh, move it over here. See what that is. There. So your capital reserve fund fund balance decreased about $400,000 to about $3.2 million. And then the other governmental funds are going to be your special revenue funds, such as ARPA, impact fees. You have some other capital project funds included in that, and your permanent funds. These all can be found in schedules starting in page 62 of your audit, in the back of it.
What is a non-spendable fund?
It means you can't spend it. So
Yeah, but what would that be?
it's, if you look up above, the inventory of 48,000 and the prepaid of 252. So those are assets you've actually already spent the items, but because they're not revenue or expense, you have to remove them as assigned or unassigned. They're non-spendable because they've already been spent.
Huh, okay.
Yeah, the prepaid actually.
That's clear as mud, but it's, you know.
It is clear as mud, but it's inventory and prepaid items, which are assets listed above.
Okay.
That is what totals to the unspendable.
Okay.
Yeah, and I just want to add that the only inventory that is in our books is the fuel. DPW, they buy fuel, a big chunk of the fuel in the storage tank, and at the end of the year, we do the reading of how much is in that, and that is money that has been spent in the current fiscal year that is actually going to be used in the next fiscal year. So that's why it's carried in there as a fund balance, but it's already money that we've already spent. We do not have it to spend on new project because we've already spent that money, but it's actually our asset. Same thing with the prepaid is expenditures that we've already paid for that are going to be used in the next fiscal year.
Yeah, you're paying ahead of time. Okay.
And I would say, like prepaid, your largest one was insurance. You would pay for it in June, but it doesn't actually begin until July 1st.
Yes, okay, thank you.
This next statement, statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance, statement E, which is page 19 of your audit. And of course, we include education, the school district as part of this, but that's $42.9 million. So your general fund shows $71 million, less the 42.9 is about 20, what did I say, $28 million of revenues in the general fund. And then your expenditures of, 65 million, $64 million, or 67, 20, $25 million of expenditures. Then with your transfers in and out. So you had a net increase to fund balance of little over $2 million. When we look at this, most of that is attributed because of your revenues exceeded what was budgeted. And if we remember, when you were building your FY22 budget, it was December of 20, so we were in COVID. And you're being fiscally conservative, which I appreciate, in building your revenues and building your expenditures, because we didn't know what COVID was going to bring for us. Mm-hmm. So that being said, we've returned to a normal, and your charges for services is really what increased, almost $900,000 over what was budgeted. You also received some additional grants than what was budgeted as well. For your expenditures, you've actually, some public safety was you overspent what was budgeted, but public works, you underspent what was budgeted. So all in all, you actually underspent your budget by about $300,000, which out of a $25 million budget, I would say is pretty accurate. It's going to be hard. You're going to be hard pressed to get much more accurate than that. This statement also shows your TIF activity as well. So you can see the net increase to TIF of about $41,000, and then your decrease to your capital reserve fund of about $400,000. The next statement, G, has to do with your proprietary funds. What happened? There we go. As we look down through this, I would say not a whole lot of activity happened. Pretty status quo from prior year to current year. No major capital increases, no major debt. In addition, fees came in about the same and you spent the same. All in all, if we look at the next schedule, you can see that with the rec programs, actually your net position, you had a deficit, but that has decreased by about $17,000. So that's getting better. And then all the water funds, had a slight decrease in their net position, but overall you do have a positive net position in all of your enterprise funds, which is great. I mean, when we compare it to some other municipalities, they definitely have negative net positions and are working towards that as well. So I would say pretty status quo with your enterprise funds. So that's what I'm going to show you for the audit. If you have any questions related to some other notes or statements, you can absolutely ask them. I did want to bring up the management letter that we provided to Martha. There was one comment about bank recs not being reviewed by another person, but in talking with Martha, my understanding is that's already fixed or in the process of being fixed. We didn't find anything else that felt needed to be addressed with best practices or any other concerns that we had. with that. So I wanted to thank Martha, thank Celine and Jesse for working with the audit, and I look forward to next year's audit as well.
Okay. Are there any questions? Tom, you usually do, but I can't see you. So if you have any,
No questions. Very clean audit. Thanks for everything you presented.
good. Well, there's one in a row for Tom. I mean, we've had good audits, but he usually has good questions. Anyone else? Okay.
All right.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
If I can just take a quick
You
moment
certainly
and thank
may.
Martha specifically for this clean audits, while sometimes boring for councils, are extraordinarily important for the fiscal health of the city and our ability to do anything else. And that is really due in large part to her diligence and professionalism in managing our day-to-day finances. $57 million in and out is a lot, and she and a very small team of people do a great job.
They do.
Yes, thank you.
Sure.
See you next year.
All right. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
It's a
Happy
three-year
travels.
contract, yeah?
Thanks.
Well, and you should be happy since you live here. This is your community, right?
Yeah, it's, I look forward to these audits, local audits, so I don't have to travel all that far. And it's nice to be able to tell my kids, like, this is what I do, and so, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Can't find it again. All right. So now we move on to, excuse me, receiving the December financials representing our financial state through the first half of FY23.
So included in the city council package at the financial report through December 31st, end of the second quarter, and also department budget narrative. Each department we do quarterly have each department look at their financials and give us where they are and where they think we are heading to, so that we can make decisions as we come closer to the end of the year. This is halfway through, and so far our expenses are very consistent with how we have been spending in the past fiscal years. Our revenues, on the other hand, are at 62%. That is really huge, and that is actually even without doing the internal transfers that we normally do. We will be doing those in the third quarter. And the huge increase actually in those revenues are on the revenues projection that we did in FY20, not FY, but in 2021 when we did the projections, and were pretty conservative. I think, as I stated earlier, COVID was still going on, and the revenues that we had and projecting what would be coming, the fees, especially inspection fees, fire and electrical inspection fees, those are actually coming out really high. I think there's a lot of construction, and we've been talking about what's going on in the city center that is bringing in revenues through permit fees and inspection fees as well. And interest on investment, when we did the projection back in 2021, the interest rate at that point was 0.2. Right now we are receiving 3.59. So that is why our interest investment revenues have more than tripled at this point, and we hope it would continue to grow. And I think all the lines were pretty much explained in the narrative by the department heads, and if you have any questions on those, happy to answer or happy to bring you back answers if I can. Not.
Are there any questions?
Yes.
I'm looking at this paragraph that talks about the interest on investment income.
Yep.
And that TD Bank pays 80% of the federal rate increase. So does that mean that the current interest rate on that account is 80% of whatever the federal rate total rate is, or was it at some rate and it's been increasing by 80% of each increase?
Yeah, it's at some rate and then it increases. If the federal increase is 5% or 8%, we get 80% of what that is, and then what original interest rate is increased by that much.
So can we all invest in that? Is there a phone number that we can call to, is that? That's a pretty good money market fund, yeah. Okay. Well,
Yes.
thank you, TD Bank.
Yes, big thanks to them.
Well, I appreciate the written reports.
Yep.
It really helps me understand where we are with each department,
Oh,
and I'm sure it's sort of a pain in the neck for them to write, but it's also probably really helpful.
And the fact that the local option tax came in higher is really good. And if you heard, Colchester is proposing to build a rec center based and funded solely by a bond that they would pay for by their own local options tax.
Oh, thank you,
And I think they were
Costco.
proposing an extra 1% for that, right? Is that what their vote is for on town meeting day? Huh? Was to add another percent just for their rec center? I could be corrected on that. Nobody. Yeah. So they have a plan. But this also plays into the kind of the proposals in the legislature about increasing tax transparency for those communities that don't collect their LOT directly, like St. Albans and Burlington, right? But giving other towns the ability to have greater visibility for those people who are allowed to, as to where the money's coming from, and so because we've talked about that since 2016, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Tom, did you have a comment since you showed us your face a moment ago? Okay. Do you have a comment?
Just to your point, Helen, about these reports, it is a fair amount of staff time, but it also, this is data that Martha and her team are looking at all day, every day. But it's a great accountability tool for the department heads to be able to tell the story behind the numbers and also make sure that they're tracking their own budgets very closely on a month-to-month basis. So it's a really good exercise that Martha and Andrew brought to the process, and appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Okay. Moving on to item 10, the proposed land development regulations amendment LDR 22-09 that adjusts the environmental protection standards adopted in 2022. And our work tonight is to hear a little bit about them and possibly set a public hearing.
Hey folks, Paul
So-
Connor, Director of Planning and Zoning. Thanks for having me this evening. As Chair Ridley just explained, these are essentially minor amendments to improve the functionality of the environmental protection standards. We've had them in place for a year. The Planning Commission reviewed some of the feedback that we've received at the staff end and have proposed a few changes, essentially simplifying the process for review of environmental restoration projects, so projects that are specifically intended to benefit the environment, stormwater projects, things like that, to distinguish between naturally occurring steep slopes and human-created steep slopes on a site plan, so that the latter is not subject to the steep slope regulations. If somebody built a building 30 years ago and put an embankment behind it, that isn't considered a naturally occurring steep slope and could be improved potentially by redevelopment through better site design. Exempting 1 and 2 family house lots smaller than a half acre in size from what was the expanded wetland buffer, so that those properties would return to having the 50-foot buffer. What we found was that many neighborhoods in South Burlington were built with the edge of individual lots being at that 50 feet. So adding the additional space essentially took up their backyards and possibly part of the house as being in the new wetland buffer. So as a functionality, those properties are almost entirely lawn areas in the back, and so this allows them to return to that 50 foot, which is what the lots were built as. So that it goes back to the standard that was in place a year ago, only for pre-existing lots for single and 2 family homes of less than half an acre.
And that would allow them to put a deck or something on
Correct.
the back.
Yep.
Okay, or build a little shed or something.
Yep, exactly. Whereas this past summer we had about a dozen folks come in and wanted to be able to put a deck or a pool or a shed or something like that, and then the process that they would need to go through to demonstrate that they don't have a wetland there would be potentially to get a wetland delineation, which is several $1,000s, and then go to the DRB for an exemption. A lot of process to prove a negative there, and so the commission felt that that wasn't the intent of what the regulations were trying to accomplish. And then lastly,
I'm sorry, Matt, do you?
Just to clarify, so we're going from what to what? Buffer.
from what was adopted last year to be 100 feet
Right.
back to the 50 feet
Back
that
to
is
50.
was the standard in South Burlington as the state standard. And then lastly, on the administrative side, allows for wetland standards in the city center form-based code area to be reviewed administratively where there's a minor change to a wetland. So otherwise, everything in the city center form-based code is already administrative. What we found is that there's been a handful of applications for which a small wetland buffer impact is the only reason that the entire project has to go to the DRB. So it still gives the administrative officer the authority to say, this seems like something substantial, I'm going to send it to the DRB, but it gives the administrative officer the authority to say, oh, this is really small. And to still use the same standards as the board would use to allow or reject. That's it. So we would recommend, if the council is willing, to schedule a public hearing for March 20th.
I'll move that.
I'll second
Did you
that.
want to move it?
No,
Okay.
Wait, did you
I
wanna say
seconded your motion. It's already done, Tim.
Okay, we could,
Short discussion here.
yeah, we can have a short discussion. We have a motion on the table, but that's fine.
Okay. Just I wanted to clarify the steep slopes.
Sure.
First of all, thank you and the planning commission for the 50-yard buffer rule. I think that makes a lot of sense. So thank you for doing that. Steep slopes. Are we striking a definition? We had a 25% grade. That was the number we attributed to steep slopes, right?
Correct.
So now I'm confused.
So
now what it is?
this past year,
What might it
prior
be?
to a year ago, there were no standards regarding steep slopes. So this was new. The standard says any development between 15 and 25% slope must be reviewed with an additional layer of scrutiny, and essentially development above 25% is prohibited with a handful of exceptions. The changes do two things. One, they make it clear that something that is restoring a failing retaining wall or something like that is not subject to the regulations. It's just a restoration of something like that. That's part of the environmental protection standards, restoration standards. And then secondly, it distinguishes between a naturally occurring steep slope and something that was approved on a site plan 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 50 years ago. An example of that might be the Maple Leaf Motel on Shelburne Road. Right behind it is a really steep slope down to the Hannaford's parking lot. That was entirely created to bring that property up to the Shelburne Road site. That steep slope is over 25%. In theory, that's a no-touch area as a result of these regulations, but it's entirely a human-constructed embankment, and so changes to that would now be exempt.
Yeah, no, I get that. No, that's good. What I'm getting at is that where it naturally occurs, how is it if there's not a number ascribed to it? Am I missing
It's
something?
defined as a 3-foot drop.
3-foot drop.
Right.
So
Over that 25%.
in a naturally occurring area.
In a naturally occurring area. And I failed to mention there is one other very small change, which is the board is given the additional authority to DRB to determine that a section of a steep slope is de minimis. So there happens to be a tiny little outcropping somewhere that if it's so small as to be not significant in any reason, the board can allow that to be changed, as opposed to having to design an entire project around something that might be the size of this table.
That's fantastic. Thank you.
So, well, we have a motion on the table. I can still ask a
Do we have a
question.
second?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's to move to hold a public hearing on Monday, March 20th at 7:30 p.m. So ready for that vote? All in favor? Aye.
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 Okay.
Thank
so
you
we'll
all.
have that. Can I just ask you just a quick question about that slope thing?
Sure.
So is another example like the retaining walls that were built in the O'Brien project, or do they have to get and it's not a variance, but permission to do that?
To build one now in the future? Is that what you're saying? if somebody wanted to build a retaining wall like that.
Yes.
So this is more about protection of existing steep slopes, not the creation of a retaining wall. There's still
okay.
the authority to create retaining walls. But if there was a naturally occurring area that had a 25 plus steep slope that somebody wanted to put it into a retaining wall, that would not be allowed today.
Oh, okay.
There aren't very many 25% steep slope areas in South Burlington. They're more found in the Bolton area, but there are some.
Okay, thank you. All righty. Okay, moving on to item 11, which is discussing H68, an act relating to removing state and municipal regulatory barriers for fair zoning and housing affordability, and potentially take action. We have Jessica Luisos, chair of the Planning Commission, who is here to present the suggested language and, you know, share with us a little bit of the their discussion. And it's we'll hear from the public if there are public comments, and then have a council discussion. My hope is that we as a council can provide clear direction about the position, I guess, of the city regarding some of the proposed changes, and how we, it is my opinion, we can best respond if we respond as a city. And so we'll get input from the Planning Commission. They have really taken the lion's share of this, but then have our discussion about how it does or does not help us continue to create the community that we've spent years trying to design, and the parameters for that. So that's the purpose of this. And so I would like us to go to Montpelier with this kind of shared vision and language that does not say we hate this and you need to not pass the bill, but rather, as reflective in this letter, a really thoughtful discussion of what we've done here and ways that we think the bill could be improved to not undercut all that we've done or undermine all that we've done. Okay? So, Jessica.
Sure. I'd like to give a lot of credit to Michael Mittag, who's here, and Andrew Chalnick, two commissioners that brought this forward and did some background research, and following our commission discussion, took the lion's share of kind of breaking that discussion down into the letter in your packet. So that was really great, and we had a really robust conversation about the bill. Also knowing that there might be a companion bill in the Senate, which we don't have language for, and thought it would be important for the city to give feedback. Following our discussion, we decided that it would probably be best to come from you rather than the Planning Commission, which is why it's in your packet, hopefully for your action. And I think the idea is really laid out in the kind of draft letter, in that, it's a really admirable kind of goal that they're, working towards. But some of the way that it's currently drafted in this very draft form doesn't really fit well with some of the work we've done here. I guess specifically in that, we've done a lot of planning to figure out like where in the city it is appropriate to have higher density. And in fact, we were really excited when staff told us that over 1,400 acres in our city are zoned at 5+ units per acre. That's something where, it was nice to know that we are providing, areas of the city for denser development. And, we have no problem with areas where we've made the planning decisions to have high density development, continuing to have high density development. I think where we did have some issues were in areas where the current draft might potentially impact areas we've designated for natural resource protection areas. And we just want to make sure that, you know, kind of as the bill moves forward towards potential law, that, you know, it's not having inadvertent effects on areas that make sense to be, you know, non-development areas or natural resource protection areas. So we've pointed out a few of those specific items for your consideration, and you know, we were trying to portray that we're pro-growth, but pro-growth in kind of a smart way. You know, looking at different areas of the city really proactively. So we do have some adjustments to the version that was in your packet. I know there was a kind of placeholder for one of the facts that staff had not provided at the time that your packet came out. I think there's maybe a yellow mark. We have some printouts here to hand out. There were a few typos that Commissioners Mateg and Chelnick kind of noticed after it had gone. I hadn't noticed when I did the last review. So
The Paul Connor, the adjustments in there are to update the number of permanently affordable homes in the city. So what was in the letter that you saw was the number that were built between 2016 and 2021, which is 169. We were able to verify that there's approximately 1,000 total existing, so that was added to the letter. And then on the second page, where, as Jessica pointed out, there was a placeholder for the amount of land that's zoned at 4 units an acre. The draft letter would be added to say approximately 2,500 acres or 24% of the city are zoned to allow 4 or 5 plus units per acre, with the majority of that being over 7 units an acre. It's about 1,400 acres is more than 7 units an acre, 7 or more, and 1,100 acres are 4 units an acre. So those are the two proposed modifications, and then as Jessica pointed out, a few little typos here and there.
Okay, any other comments from you two?
I think that was the general gist of our discussion.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'd just like to remind everyone that this was looking at H68. There is a larger bill that the Senate is putting together. And as often happens, the House has lots more committees and they tend to focus on their own area of expertise and develop a bill that deals with that. And then another committee does a different aspect. And the Senate, conversely, often, since it's smaller and you often are, not often, you are always on 2 committees, at least, you tend to create bigger bills that then go to other committees. So the process is a little bit different in both houses, but it also takes a fair amount of time. I know was some concern that this is really rushing through. And I had a good conversation with Senator Ram Hinsdale today, and she was pretty certain that her bill, they would like to mark it up in the next 2 weeks, but then it has to go to natural resources. It has money in it and has to go to appropriations. Both places that have other stuff on their table too, or on their wall. So the process is, there's lots of stages where the city can comment or assist with language that perhaps, not perhaps, but really meets the goals of these bills, but also protects the hard work that South Burlington has already done. So I think it's good to get in. We have a slot on Wednesday to present this, but that won't be the last time that we can make comments and assist them in understanding at least our perspective. And we,
2 days, this Wednesday?
yes, yeah.
Which committee is that, Jared?
It's economic development, housing, economic development. It's kind of like
On the Senate side.
on the Senate side. So it won't be H68, but it's this larger bill that encompasses the portions of 68 that we've looked at, as well as other aspects of kind of this whole housing, climate change, economic development, infrastructure, zoning. It's a pretty big bill.
How does that work on Wednesday? What's the timing? Who will be presenting? What will be presented?
Well, what we have to discuss tonight is what we will be presenting.
Oh, I
We
see.
have this letter from the Planning Commission, and if there's other things that the council would like to add or to change, now's the time, so that I think it will be Paul and Jesse and Jessica, can you? I don't know if you can. Maybe not, but
I hadn't heard before this moment.
Well, we
so, I mean,
just
I have
got-
testified before, but not. Yeah.
yes, yes.
I don't see us on the agenda.
So we just received the request this afternoon. We have not confirmed it,
Oh.
so we are not.
We have a couple
On.
time slots that are available.
And from my position, I wouldn't confirm that we were going to speak on something like this without a vote of the council directing us to
Right.
give testimony. So we have yet to confirm it, and I think it's a discussion tonight how you all want, what you want to, the five of you vote on as a statement of the city's position, if you want to vote on as a statement of the city's position. Obviously, we have 20,000 residents who can make any statement they would like about any bill before the legislature, but if the city wants to take an official position, you all should vote on that. And it would be helpful, I think, to staff if you gave us some direction about, you know, what you wanted us to provide testimony on and how as we move forward. Because as several folks have suggested, this is an incredibly detailed, very well written letter about one bill that will change in the days and weeks to come. And how nimble do you want us to be to provide testimony as that iterative process moves forward? Or do you want to identify somebody on your body to be the point person to provide that testimony?
Okay, so those decisions are.
That's what you
we
guys
have
are
to do
here to talk
tonight.
about today.
Can,
Jessica.
I think, we were, as a commission, hoping to keep this general enough to get the major points out there. And then we also do recognize that it'd be really nice if someone either from the planning staff or, obviously if you authorize it, but we do think kind of ongoing nimbleness to comment on future versions could be really helpful.
And my understanding from Keisha is that they've heard from and will continue to hear from lots of different planning directors around the state. So we're not the only ones who've weighed in, and they've already made changes, or potential changes, they haven't voted anything out, to that bill to address issues that municipalities have raised that are important, that even the best intentions and the best drafters, you can't think of everything. There's a date and you got to get the thing printed, and then you know that you're going to change it. And, other committees will also have their imprint. And there can be amendments on the floor that change things, and then you go to the other body. So there's a lot of steps along the way to try to reflect as broad a spectrum of interest as possible. Thoughts, Matt?
Yeah, can I ask a question to our city manager?
Yeah, yes, please.
has the Vermont League of Cities and Towns made any declarative statements about either Seth Bongart's Bill 68 or Senator Keisha Ram's bill, and what are those statements?
So the board, the VLCT board met with Representative Bongartz and Senator Ram Hinsdale in December before the session started. They had, my understanding is for months, since August, they have been meeting with different stakeholders to put together drafts of bills. So we were one of those stakeholders. The league was one of those stakeholders that they met with. We have not taken a specific position. I will be totally transparent, wearing both hats. I think one of the concerns, and I think that the Planning Commission captured this really well, one of the concerns that the league is trying to walk here is that we know that there is a housing crisis in the state. We experience it as an employer. We hear it from our business community. We hear it from our residents. And I think some perceive municipalities as being the voice of no in legislation historically. And so the league is very interested in staying a partner, you know, as the Planning Commission outlined. Municipalities are the incubator of ideas in our state. We are the places where we test out things. Sorry, this is a long-winded answer. Where we test out things, and we think that the more municipalities can stand in partnership with the state to solve climate change challenges, housing challenges, whatnot, the better. So we have not taken a hard position saying, no, we don't like you talking about local zoning to address the housing crisis. We are open to those suggestions. I think what they heard from the board as a whole at that meeting was to solve the housing crisis solely focusing on changes in municipal permitting is not going to work. Right. That to actually address the housing crisis in the state, we need to look at municipal permitting, we need to look at state level permitting, we need to look at financing mechanisms, and we need to look at the court appeal system. And unless we do that holistically, we are not going to solve the crisis. So the challenge for the league is how, and these are, I know, words that the Planning Commission was trying not to use, but how do we accept the willingness to give up some local control or to have state impose policy positions on municipalities when it might only solve 20 or 30% of a crisis, if it will solve that to begin with, and would undo some of the incubator innovation that has already been done at the local level. So we have not officially taken a position. We are purposely not saying no.
Okay.
Does that help?
It does. It informs my opinion.
And the we there was the league, for which I serve as the board president, which is, sorry, that's a little confusing.
And has very capable, competent, and amazing advocates in the State House.
Yes.
But nothing on short-term rentals or a rental registry that the league, you know, included in the whole package, because I would see those two things as additional items that need to be included in any solution.
Sorry. Those are other policy positions of the league. They weren't specifically commented on to those two legislators at that meeting.
Okay.
Thoughts?
So, do you intend to have us sign this letter? Is that the, okay.
That would be my intention.
Yeah, that was what we thought was probably the strongest position to go forward. I think if you were not interested, I don't know, I guess, I'm not sure that we made an official decision, but about whether we would send something on our own. But I think the intent was that you would sign it and it would come from you.
Okay, all right.
I don't know if we have to vote to sign it. I'm happy to have that vote, but.
You said you had paper copies of the
I'm not
most
gonna sign
recent.
I have a paper copy.
One paper
but I'm
copy,
happy to
okay.
make more. As I said, those were the two
Well, those
edits.
are the additions, the numbers, and
The additions of the numbers, and then a
typos.
couple little typos that were not consequential.
Yeah.
I'm happy to go print other copies if others would like to review it, though.
I would love to see the most updated copy. Yeah, the word compromise was something that, as a council, I can see as a planning commission that it was a compromise, perhaps, you know, your process. But from from my position here on the council, I saw it as really refined and specific set of regulations. The compromise was done, you know, in a different setting. So it really, I saw it as something that reflected a very thoughtful process with very refined rules that came out based on all of the different questions that you went through. So that was the one word that stood out to me, is perhaps that's something a planning commission perspective, but from my position on the council,
Where is that?
I will look
Which
for
paragraph?
It's right, it's the page that has the it's the page that has the number 1 bullet, and it's the large paragraph above that, and it's,
Thank you, Jesse. You're good.
I had to word search for it.
Okay.
So it says many of these provisions are compromises. The conservation
are.
PUD is a good example.
Yeah. I saw it as, you know, and the way I read it as it was a way to protect these homes from flooding. It was a way to provide green space and well-being to the residents. It was, I mean, it serves various purposes. It keeps salt and phosphorus away from waterways. I mean, there's just so much that I saw that's not a compromise. That's really a strong set of rules that meet a lot of our goals and the needs, quite frankly, in order to you know, be healthy stewards of our environment, and that includes our waterways and lake.
Michael-
And later
I'm sorry.
on, we talk about the careful balance that the city has struck, you know, kind of at the bottom of the page. And you're right, that's maybe a better, that's how we did typically talk about kind of the balance between different regulations as we have made changes.
So if I
Can I just have Michael,
sure.
because I think he helped.
The compromise.
Would you go to a mic, please? Thank you.
Make sure it's on.
Michael Mittag, I'm also on the Planning Commission. The compromise that we refer to there is meant to indicate that this set of rules was a result of a lot of consultation and input from in the public hearings from all interests in the city. So
I like
that's
that.
where the compromise comes from.
I like what you
That
just said.
we didn't compromise the rules. We made the rules as a consequence of compromising to get everybody on to yes.
Well,
See,
so maybe you can say many of these provisions are a result of consultation and, you know, in-depth discussion or something.
Right. I think that's better because compromise can have a negative connotation to it.
Okay. Matt, you wanted to say something?
Well, just that I appreciate the letter. It's extremely well written. Perhaps I shouldn't say too much, but 68 is not the bill that's going to move. It's going to move out of the Senate.
Oh, I understand that,
even
but that's the
referencing
bill we
60
had. Yeah.
Well, but no, we don't. I mean, we have a Senate bill.
Well, they didn't when they were discussing this.
Okay.
We
Well,
didn't,
I'd like.
Anyway.
I'd
yeah.
remove 68 because it doesn't really make sense in the context. Number one. Number two, I will not sign this letter, and I'd like it reflected that I'm not signing this letter.
Okay.
I got some things to say too.
Okay. So rather than say on 68, maybe it can say the omnibus. I think that's the name of it. Do you know the name of
It's right here.
the title?
It is, well, it's a DR. It's David Hall's DR request. DRRQ 23-0091, draft 6.1 is the latest version. Draft request 23-0091,
Thanks, Paul.
draft 6.1.
Okay.
And it's Senator Ron Hinsdale's bill.
Okay. Thank you. So you don't want to make any other statements, Matt, other than you're not going to support it, is that right?
Well, I would remove 60, if I were, well, it doesn't really matter because I'm not supporting
Well,
it.
I think that
But
removing
68 is,
68 is,
move
that's
68
helpful.
would be, I'm arguing against my position, but I would still remove it because it makes it clear that we haven't read the Senate bill.
I didn't understand what you said there.
Well, it talks about the vermet.
H68 is specifically referred to,
Yeah.
but those of us that are in the building know that Senator Rom Hinsdale's bill is the one that's moving. 68 stuck up on the wall in Amy Sheldon's committee. So,
There is reference to the Senate. Yeah, yeah, there
Paul,
is.
can you send the letter to Tom?
I don't want to sign this bill. I don't want to sign this letter. So, I mean, it's up to you, but that's what my suggestion for those that do want to send it.
Okay. Tom, you wanted to make a statement or a comment or?
Yeah, just a couple of things. So I just want to say that there are 6.1 million acres in the great state of Vermont, and I think it's entirely appropriate for the state, for us to consider our climate and housing goals, very appropriate for the state to be considering the policies that are used at the local level regarding housing. So I applaud the leaders in the House and the Senate that are looking at this important topic, and I hope we all agree, and I see that in the letter, that this is well worth our time and attention. I just also want to recognize that Senator Rom Hinsdale has been doing remarkable work on this. And in a note she sent to all the counselors over the last couple of days, it is continuing to evolve. So thank you, Chair Reilly, for articulating the entire process and that there's going to be plenty of time to weigh in. I don't support this letter as is because I just think it's a little premature. I also don't necessarily agree with some of the sentiments in there, which is consistent with why I voted against some of the land development regulations that were put before us over the last year or so. I haven't had anything to do with the conversations on these bills. I just applaud, and when Senator Rom Hinsdale mentioned this bill and I saw reports of it last December, I'm just glad the discussion's being had. So I'm not going to vote on this because I don't necessarily agree with some of the statements in here, and I also just think it's premature. I think nothing has left either chamber so far, and if this body wants to consider something that does make it on over through crossover or after the Senate Economic Development Committee does mark up the bill and make some changes, I think that'd be more relevant testimony. Otherwise, I think you're going to have to keep going back and revising this letter over and over again. So I'd encourage this conversation to be punted until March or so.
Okay, I comment with Senator Rom Hinsdale is that she welcomed this input, and that it wasn't premature, that they need to understand and appreciate how much they need to understand different perspectives in the local communities. That as you are well aware, there are lots and lots of communities who don't have any zoning. There are more communities who do not have sewer and water in their town center than do. So aspects of the policies that they're discussing address the lack of things, but that isn't the case in South Burlington. And I appreciate that neither you nor Matt voted for this, but this is the LDRs and the regulations and the approach that this city has embarked upon. I think they identify how long we have been working on affordable housing and thought about where that should be developed. And I don't recall you being opposed to affordable housing and developing densely in certain areas. So the fact that you didn't like habitat blocks is an issue, but I think these bills, both Seth's and Kesha's, are much broader than that. And I think to give sort of a broader view to a committee that's struggling to, and I'm sure they will be struggling, to find language that works for all communities and not know that one of the largest communities in the state has really thought about this, tried things, been successful at developing much affordable housing in the very recent time, in spite of some of these LDRs. So I think, will it be what we say on Wednesday, if we do, the last thing we'd want to say? No, excuse me, no. But I think it's incumbent upon this community and our city management to keep abreast of that, so we don't find in May that there's a bill that is vague, doesn't have language that clarifies for everyone what is meant by where sewer lines run. Does that mean all of the property that runs next to that line? Or is it just a certain amount of space? Is it, 60 feet in? It has impacts all over our city. And, and that's our city policy. So I think it's very timely that we let them know that we've looked at least parts of this and have helpful thoughts and recommendations in terms of what would work for South Burlington and maybe Rutland and some other communities. It doesn't say don't do anything. It says when you do things, please be aware that you might have a negative impact on a community that has embraced development, affordable housing, taking care of the environment and having open spaces for our residents. I mean, we've kind of tried to balance all of it. Maybe the balance isn't perfect for some, but that was our goal. And at least the majority of the council supported that. Michael?
I think we've also been at pains, maybe not enough, to improve this bill, to improve it in a way that it will meet the objectives of more housing, which, as it's written now, won't. There, as Chairman really just pointed out, there are a lot of communities that don't have water and sewer, and they will not be captured by this bill at their town centers. Jericho is one of them, Colchester to some extent, Charlotte is another. They all just have private septic. So, but I'd also like to say, just to Matt and Tom, you endorsed the climate action plan that South Burlington has adopted. And part of what's in this bill, you didn't endorse it. Well, it was at least the majority of the council, and they represent the city, you represent the city. So as I see it, and probably as other outsiders see it, the city of South Burlington has adopted a climate action plan. And this bill in some ways preempts some of the work that we've done, and will make it if passed, will make it very difficult for us to improve on our action plan in the future and meet the objectives that we want to meet by 2030 and 2050. So it's important from that point of view as well. But I'll go back to my first point. We did try to improve the bill and make sure that its objectives will be met.
Other comments or thoughts? Tim?
So I support the letter. The regional planning commissions work with local municipalities really hard to create this web of of regulations that best serves each community, but that work together with each community as well, and they dovetail and they complement each other to implement specific objectives. And anytime you have the state trying to do some central planning where we have local planning and they want to override our local planning, and as you can know, we do a lot of work with our local planning and a lot of work creating and crafting new regulations and changes to regulations. I can't see, I know that the source of the bill comes from, its heart is well placed, but I really don't like the sense that it overreaches into local municipalities and attempts to tell them what to do in their own zoning. Because we work very hard to manage ours on our own, and we spend a lot of money and it's a lot of time. And I think that South Burlington has done an excellent job in creating that balance that you spoke about in the letter, right? Where you're trying to balance many things at the same time: your reactions to climate action and the needs there, and affordable housing, and open spaces. And we went through IZ for 3 years, and what came out of that was a set of changes. And I know they weren't supported by Tom and Matt, but you obviously support the process that was used to get there. And if you support the process, you should support this letter, because what the state is proposing is they want to do away with some of our own ability to come up with our own process, which is really important for the voters to understand about how their community derives regulations that affect the quality of their own life. So I strongly support the letter, and I support any actions that we take to go to Montpelier and make our voices known, so that we can create a better outcome, whatever the legislative process produces. I know what they want to try to do, you know, and so, but they just, I don't think they understand. I don't think they really know what goes on in some of the larger cities, and we'll be glad to tell them.
Well, I guess that was my point. I think they need to understand what's going on all over Vermont in order to craft something that will be useful and really move the ability to create more housing, more good housing, some of which hopefully will be affordable. And
more nuanced bill.
yes, yeah. I might add that it's very interesting that one of our favorite developers in South Burlington did call Senator Ram Kinsdale to complain about the duplexes, the language in here that requires duplexes, because he was fearful that that would change his living community, because there wouldn't be enough parking spots, so some of these duplex owners would have to park their cars on the street, and they don't do that now because they don't have duplexes. So, I mean, it's just kind of ironic to me, a builder who's very anxious to put up a ton of building, but not in my the place where I live, because I don't want to see a car on the street, because we don't have duplexes now, and they belong somewhere else. Just ironic. Other comments, or?
I too support the letter. I know that Wednesday's around the corner, so I guess I'll put just these comments out there. I'm not necessarily expecting them to be included, but if we could remove compromises, I like the consultation much more. And I also would say that I would like to see more about the buffer, so that our new homes and what we hope will be more affordable homes will be less subject to flooding with the severe weather events that we'll be facing as a community in the decades to come and centuries to come. And also the current progress that you're making on infill. I think that's important to include, that we have the number of acres and the percentage of acres, but we intend for that, 4+ to go up with infill projects that will, so just a slight little, which we expect will increase since we are currently developing regulations governing infill. I'd just like to say, we're not done yet. We're still working to, increase beyond this density that we currently have in the city. And I guess the question I had too was how having state regulations imposed, what would that do to our TDR program? I have no idea what that would do. We're trying to create incentives to go above 4 units per acre and giving people who have TDRs to sell, a market in which to sell it. And I don't know the complexities of that, but I think that you make mention of the TDRs in this letter, and I think perhaps when we go in, whoever goes in for testimony, there could be, some a little bit in the weeds that we have a bank and we can't leave these people hanging without making good on the promissory notes we've given to them. So I guess those are the 3 big things that, if it doesn't make it into the letter, because I think the letter is very good, we should include it in testimony. And I do support also regular testimony because I think we are an incubator. I think we are innovative. I took great pride voting for the new land development regulations and knowing how hard you all had worked, knowing that we have an expert in stormwater as the chair of our planning commission who has the respect of the entire planning commission. And Jessica, you have just been an amazing leader for the city. And no way do I want to throw you under the bus. Like, just no way. Look at our director of planning and zoning. The 2 of you together, along with the commission, you have, I believe, steered this community to a sustainable future. And I will defend that. And, or I support whoever can go to Montpelier to defend that. So I just want that to be loud and clear too, because all of these hundreds of hours and sweat and tears that went into these, for it all just to go to naught. Who would want to be part of the planning commission anymore? Who would, go home after a busy week of dealing with, all the permitting and the rules and the vying interests, and just have it all be washed away and say, wow, my work and all those hours and, all the effort I'm giving, it's for naught. Maybe I'll do something else. There's something that's very, I find, I don't like the word anti-American because I find that to be too big of a bag, but there's something that rubs me wrong to have this be so centrally directed when we have such expertise, but also incentives that the state has put in place and that we have been actively responding to. We have, I think, been in a nice dance with the state. So I'll put it that way, and let's carry on that dance.
Yeah. Let's play some more music. Yes, Michael.
I'd like to thank Jessica, Andrew, Paul, and Jessica, and Kelsey, because we got this done in 48 hours. And it was
Very well
tough.
written.
It was a weekend in between, and I think everybody really, really pulled their weight. And I have a question for Jesse. Would it be appropriate for this council to send this letter also to the league for distribution to its members?
You certainly could send it to the league. That's not typically how testimony to the legislature moves forward. It usually moves directly to the committee.
No, I didn't mean as testimony. I meant as something that would be of interest to its members.
Sure.
Right, okay. Paul, do you have any thoughts of how to structure this and
I think my only suggestion would be to reiterate what our city manager had said at the beginning, which is that if the council does give the go-ahead on this letter or some adjustments to it, to maybe also give some broad parameters and guidance to whomever you choose to assign to speak to the legislature, so that we can speak as this bill or the Senate companion or other related ones evolve and speak maybe to the vision, the objectives, the successes, and as several have mentioned, the next steps of what the city is looking to do and how that can be considered and be a model in other places around the state. So that would be my one suggestion.
to add that? So would that be kind of an administrative or city letter on top of this?
I think it would be direction in a motion to, if you were to assign a member of yourselves or to staff, I think it would just be in a motion to, that's some guidance to staff as well.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate it. I do think you need the guidance, and I will make that motion. But I also, just thinking about in terms of the most effective presentation on Wednesday is, I mean, I think this is long and powerful, and you're not going to get through all of this in half an hour, and you don't need to, because they'll get it ahead of time, and hopefully they'll have read it, and you'll just do some highlighting. But we also, I think, would start out with the kind of city vision or comments that you made, and Paul just kind of summarized as well.
Sure. I guess I'm a little. This is a really hard position for staff to be in when you have a 3-2, what I perceive to be a 3-2 vote on a council to go and be nimble and give policy guidance to other elected officials. I'm wondering if there's a middle ground solution where I think we all know where each other stands. I don't think there's confusion about what we've done in the past to be an incubator. These 4 specific points about how to improve the current bill, and the kind of high level values we want to maintain in our LDRs, which are the policy documents of our city. I'm wondering if there's a middle ground approach where, I'm sorry to throw you under the bus here, but for you to go and provide you, Helen, as council chair, to go and provide the main testimony on Wednesday, given what you've heard with this letter, if it's signed by 3 councilors, and then Paul to be there with you to talk about any kind of operational specifics about the LDRs, how, to the greatest extent we can, as defined as it is, which is not very much yet, what those kind of on the ground permitting implications might be, and really focus on those 2 areas at the moment. What is the current policy documents and conversation the Planning Commission, the council has had in the last week? What are any operational implications? And then as we get closer to crossover and know how the bills are really going to formulate, then potentially come back to the council and say, are there other kind of specific asks we want to be making through the process?
Okay, I have just a question, because oftentimes when we have a letter, it's signed by the chair, as long as the council gives her direction to do that. And we have a majority of the council giving her direction to do that.
Yep, that's fine.
I don't see a need for me to sign the letter or us to have 5 spaces like an ordinance. I just wanted to put that out there. we clearly have a majority here. It's the same majority who passed these LDRs, but it's the law of our of our municipality, excuse me. And we, I think, can just give Helen that authority. I mean, that's my position with regard to who signs the letter. The second thing is, Keisha put out on the Front Porch Forum that there was a joint hearing a week from this Thursday at 5 with the House and the Senate. So that would be a second opportunity, I think, within the next week and a half to have someone go. And then the deadline for signing up to speak was the Wednesday at noon. So that's February 15th, right, at noon to sign up, and then with speaking February 16th at 5. So I just wanted to bring that to people's attention.
Well, what's your pleasure?
So my opinion is that since Matt and Tom voted against the LDRs, I would prefer if they just abstain in the situation and not sign at all and just not even talk about it. And then you still have a majority and we move forward, as Megan just said.
Just with me, just from me?
I mean, just the fact that you have you have a majority of three
The city
counselors at this
half of
point.
the city council.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So I would just have to say something to that.
Yes.
So I wear a couple of hats. So Tim, I wouldn't agree, and I'll vocally say that I can't say nothing. I have a responsibility to the constituents in my other role that when asked on these things, I'll have to weigh in on them. So I'm not disagreeing with most of what you just said, but I am against this letter. And if asked about this in my state Senate capacity, I'll weigh an opinion when the bill gets to a closer state of possible passage.
So, Tom, are you saying that you won't sign this bill in part because
The letter.
or the letter rather, that it's the timing is off, it's premature, and you're almost suggesting that if later in the session, if the bill has, seems to have made some changes or is coming together, then you would be supportive of having the city describe how this might undermine their current LDRs and their vision for climate, housing, economic development, whatever, transportation, all those kinds of things, the environment?
I think it's always difficult to deal with hypotheticals. And so in your question there, I see a lot of caveats. And so what I'll say is I've gotten in trouble before when I've made clear a position and only had to change it after I collected more information as we go forward. On this, and please know that I will definitely be following the issue closely. This letter, because of, for example, there were two reasons why I didn't vote for the land development regulations that I stated in multiple forums, was one, the habitat blocks, I think have a questionable from a constitutional perspective, and the other one was the conservation PUDs. I did not think was a good use of land or a good prioritization. And I see in this letter some contrary points to that position that I previously had. So for those reasons, as well as I think this is premature, I'm not supporting this letter tonight in its current form. And I do think more time could be had before you officially weigh in as a city when you see what the changes are that Senator Keisha Ram Hinsdale has already mentioned to her in her email. So that's the premature piece, Council, really.
Thank you.
And I don't, sorry, it's my turn.
Go ahead, yeah, you can take a turn.
It's three people want to send this letter. It's going to happen. I just, either it has to be mentioned that I am not supportive of it, or I will do it separately, independently. Doesn't matter to me. It can happen either way, but it will be said somehow. I don't want the interpretation to be that City Councilor Matt Cota supports all the items in this letter and opposes these actions in the bill that Senator Keisha Ram is currently considering in her committee.
Okay. Well, what would the council like to do? You want to have 3 signatures, or do you just want to?
I want to empower you, and if you want to go to Montpelier or talk to people, I mean, that's your prerogative, Matt, and Tom is there. I find it to be disrespectful of the planning commission and the whole process here in the city, but that's your choice.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, I can make it clear if someone asks what the vote is.
Mhm.
From my perspective, this is city policy,
Right.
and that's what I'm sharing and need to share, and its impact on how we envision the city and the development of housing and infrastructure and all of that.
Because
But it would be nice to have Paul there.
It's always nice to have Paul around.
Yes. Okay. All right, so shall we take a formal vote, or is this just,
So I'll move that we approve the letter as amended, so changing compromises to consultation. I think Jessica wrote that down. And then just taking out the number H68
So
in the first paragraph.
many of these provisions are
The result of,
the result of consultation and in-depth discussion. That's what we said.
Okay.
And then you said also about changing where it says H68 to be.
removing H68. I don't know.
yeah,
Um,
we
As
probably,
a reference, if I can interject, the Vermont Planners Association referenced it as H68 and DR-23-091.
Oh, that,
Okay,
that
well then
sounds
let's,
good.
let's
there isn't a
include
bill
that.
number, but that tracking, I think tracking is probably helpful for the recipients.
Yeah.
Because I imagine that there are many, many bills that are unrelated to this that are also being considered by the legislature.
That's fair enough. So just the compromises part. And authorizing
Get
Chair
those numbers
Reilly,
right, yeah.
authorizing Chair Reilly to sign on behalf of the city, and also authorizing Chair Reilly and other city planners to participate in the state level discussion, as including City Manager Jesse Baker and Paul Connor, our Director of Planning and Zoning.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
No.
Nay.
Okay, so it passes I know, I can't count that. He said nay and I said no. 3-2. Okay. Well, thank you for all your work in
Thank
short
you.
time.
And thank
it's-
everyone who worked on it.
Yes, it was quite a,
Thank you for not nominating me.
Thank you, Jessica.
okay. All right, so now we are where? Discuss a potential leaf blower ordinance and provide direction to staff. It's a council request. I don't know whose request, someone requested it. I'm
So
thinking-
this is a, sorry, do you want?
No, go ahead.
This is, my recollection was that several of you have talked about this as a potential priority to regulate the use of this equipment. Over the last couple of months, we are in the process of drafting lots of ordinances. So before we spent a whole lot of time drafting something that was not of interest, we wanted to just bring it to you and see what specifically you're looking for, and if at all possible, where this sits with the priorities of heating in existing homes, short-term rentals, rental registries, and our full ordinance update that we're working on.
So where it
we're
fits in
open
terms of the priority.
Unless you, given that I don't think you want us to bring you, a whole code of ordinances to update all at once, it would be helpful to know what, like if this is more important because it's seasonally appropriate, we could fast track this one. And really just want to hear some conversation before we start spending a lot of staff time on it.
Yeah, I would think there's already an ordinance out there, Burlington's, that serves as a model. Hopefully, this wouldn't be a heavy lift.
ordinance.
I think that the short-term rentals would be a heavier lift.
Yes.
Yes.
And we mean non-electric leaf blowers, right? So any internal combustion leaf blower, I'm assuming. I don't
Yeah,
I don't know what the Burlington ordinance says,
I
but
don't know what it
I
says
don't know
either.
either.
we might as well just copy theirs.
Should it, we should at least, that should probably at least be the basis for the ordinance.
Mhm.
And then if we want to modify in any way we can, make it a gentler, kinder version or harder.
I think the thing that I recall from the discussion is that Burlington has a window where they can't be used when the windows are like open because it's warm outside, whereas the recommendation that came forward to our body was that it would be year round. It wouldn't just be this window warmer weather months.
I don't know. They're a nuisance. They're noisy.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So is that enough direction? I mean, I don't know. I've done. Tim, do you agree that this could be moved up?
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, could we at least get the content sent to us of the Burlington ordinance if we can find that out quickly, and then we can look at it and say, hey, this looks like it's easy to do.
Or to ask Burlington how it's enforced and is it working? Is
Yeah,
it the-
that's the
Right,
other,
get
that's the other
some
part of it. I
feedback
don't know.
from them,
Yeah,
not just copy it.
I don't know how that's
I
going.
don't want to replicate something that isn't working well.
Right.
And then
If they don't enforce it, then that's, you know.
And then with regard to the existing homes for non-fossil fuel use and all of that, and the short-term rentals, I guess I'd like to hear from our city attorney on what works best for him in terms of how long it would take, and I mean, do we have to say one before the other? I don't know. I mean, I think that the reporter that I spoke with and who reported in the other paper said that the number of short-term rentals in South Burlington has increased by 25% in over a year. So that's a pretty big number. And I guess we should maybe find out if they're being taxed as commercial as opposed to just residential. I mean, that could be kind of a short.
That's where the state could get involved.
I've said that every time I've written or
and do
spoken.
their part and maybe fund the municipalities to take over this type of operation if they lay a groundwork for it.
Exactly.
Or propose the groundwork for it, right?
Yes.
Number one, all rentals have got to be hardwired interconnected smoke detectors, so they got to be inspected, right?
Right.
Number one, safety.
Yeah.
Number two, registration, right? Affidavit. Number three, tax collection and verification of tax collection, right?
Yep. Yep.
Matt?
With regards to short-term rentals, to hear not a contrary viewpoint, but another viewpoint of someone who's real statewide expert in this, is to contact Julie Marks with the Short-Term Rental Alliance. She's worked with different cities on different ordinances. It may not be what you end up with, but at least to have that conversation. She has a wealth of knowledge, and she lives in Burlington, is a very bright individual, and she could give context to what's happening to the marketplace.
That would be great. Should we have her come to a council? I'm sorry, go ahead. What were you going to say?
So just on the short-term rental registry side, we have stood up a cross-departmental team that's working on that. So they have listened to your discussion last time, gone through like the key questions about taxation, whatnot, are doing that research with the intention of coming back to you likely the first meeting in April once the new council is seated, not necessarily with a full book of ordinances, but with some kind of here's where we're going, here are what we see as the high level goals that we are writing the ordinance to, are we on the right track? So that's often running. I don't mean to suggest that we're pausing on all of these until we get your priorities. I think the question more was, that is a bit of a heavy lift. So if this leaf blower one, I think you and I had emailed about the seasonality of this. If this was really something we wanted to get in place, by the end of April, then we would need to know that timing requirement so we could go through the full ordinance process.
Mhm.
That's really what I was trying to get at tonight. Not to say only work on one thing until we only work on another thing.
Okay.
Sorry, I wasn't clear on that.
Okay. Yeah.
So I think this is helpful guidance. We can get going. Just helpful to hear you talk about it a little bit before we start pulling sentences. So thank you.
Okay.
Kayla is saying she would like to make a comment.
Okay.
Kayla Moore.
Oh, Kayla Moore, if you would like to make a comment?
Hi, yeah, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I thank you to the council for putting the leaf blower ordinance on the agenda for discussion. I just want to say quickly, I know that the Burlington ordinance is seasonal, and I think that was put in place more around noise. But I think that was before, well, maybe not before many people realized, but before it was maybe many people realize how harmful leaf blowers really are to the climate and to our health. The emissions are really, really harmful. And so that's, I think, justification for a year-wide ban and not just doing what Burlington has done. So I just want to put that out there.
Thank you.
Yeah, they're two-stroke engines.
Yeah, okay. Any other, that's it, right? Oh, Michael?
Follow on from what Kayla just said is that these equipment, these leaf blowers, are not used in winter. They're only used from spring to fall. So seasonality is not an issue. You could just make it year round. You don't have to define when it may or may not be used. They're only used.
Oh, I meant seasonal from when we want to go into effect. So if the council was concerned that spring is coming and people are going to start using them, therefore we need to fast track this so it's ready for spring. That's what I meant by seasonal.
I was referring to Burlington's window,
Oh, yeah.
which we don't need to have.
See, it turns into a snow blower in the wintertime.
Well, you know, I've seen
Thank you,
people use it.
Michael.
that way. So they do use it in the winter too. Yeah,
Only with certain conditions.
right, true.
Fluffy snow.
Okay, Roseanne, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I want to echo what Kayla and Michael said. I really support this. And as Michael and Kayla pointed out, it's I don't know how it originated, but it's way more than just noise. Although noise is horrible, and we can go into that if you want. But I mean, the effect on the climate crisis, these gas-powered equipment uses massive amounts of fuel and produce massive amount of pollution. So in and of themselves, just that should be enough to ban them. But as you're talking about seasons, our seasons are changing. So I hope this is year-round, because we may be blowing leaves in February in a few years. So with the climate change. So I totally support what you're doing and support what Kayla and what Michael said.
Okay, thank you. All right, I don't see anyone else who wants to speak, so I will move on to item 13. Is there any other business?
I do have some.
Okay, Megan?
Yeah, the beauty of this is going to be in the enforcement, of course. So keep neighborly, everybody. But what I wanted to say was just walking our dog at Wheeler and on a leash. There are still dogs off leash walking through Wheeler on those trails. And I talked about it with my husband as we were stepping over little dog excrement. That one of the goals of having a park there was to make sure that the dogs who were off leash were in the park and not on the trail. So what, we were thinking, and I'll just say I, because I don't want to put him on the hook, but is perhaps the dog, the Common Area for Dogs Committee, that they could do some enforcement perhaps, or some education. But what the city could do is put a sign at the entrance to the trails saying your dogs must be leashed, and here is the fine, for being unleashed or for, not picking up after your dog, right? And I just making it really clear, because that is a beautiful trail system right next to, is it Muddy Brook?
Mm-hmm.
so one of our waterways that we're trying to protect. I mean, we just really need to put it up there for people. This, these are our rules. And if you want your dog off leash, there is a dog park just right around, the bend. So just really making it clear, because the fear is, of course, since this is now a destination dog park, is we might get more dogs walking off leash on the trails as a result of trying to solve that issue. So I know, Matt, I don't know if you're going to be with the dog park committee at all, but I don't know if it's okay if I talk to Betty about having them discuss enforcement.
Yeah, could I reply to that?
Sure.
Absolutely, 100%. As someone who has a dog who is 138 pounds and is always on a leash, the issue is not those that have dogs that are well trained and can run side by side. The issue is when the dogs meet the other dogs that are on the leash, and you happen to have a dog that's 138 pounds. That's where the trouble is. So you are exactly right, Councilor Emery. The reason why we have leash laws is not because your dog is fine, so it's the other dogs that need to be on the leash. It's because of the reaction that occurs.
Right.
And the people that could be in between, that could be harmed. So you've nailed it. There are signs that they are like campaign signs or realtor signs that the Committee for Common Area Dogs have put up at Wheeler and at Red Rocks. They have a picture of a dog with a leash in his mouth saying leash up. They have been taken down because of the snow. They're usually up in the summertime, in the spring and the fall. So they should go back. We have them. They don't say what you said, though. They don't remind people that there is a fine on the books for not having a leash dog. So yes, we have signs. Yes, they should go back up. But the question about whether we should talk about the actual fines if you don't, I think that's a good discussion to have with Betty and the Common Area Dog. So that's all I'm going to say about that.
I've had a discussion with Betty on a number of issues because we were both in the dog park one day and grousing, both of us, about there's the dog park. There are bags as you walk in. There are 2 containers for the dog waste, and people still don't pick up the dog poop. I mean, I understand they're running around and you have 2 dogs there or something and you don't have an eye and one of them, it goes to the bathroom and you don't notice it, so you don't pick it up. But it's so common. It's not that. So, and I suggested that she have conversations with the Common Area for Dogs Committee about, she had wanted to at least offer, some people on the committee or others who would be willing to do some monitoring, would be willing to pick up dog poop, and encourage other people to do that. Have, a little, maybe even have a little ambassador thing, or whatever you'd have in a dog park. And I also thought it was important for them to discuss and come to the council. Maybe it would be helpful if one of the dog bags and container, or maybe just the dog bag, was on the far side of the part of the fenced in area. Because I get it, oh darn, I had 2 and I used them yesterday. I don't have any dog bags, and here's my dog pooping, and the bag is way over there, and you don't walk all the way, or if you walk over there, you forget where they pooped, and then it doesn't get picked up. I appreciate that. So maybe it's something that filling them could be one of the activities of Common Area for Dog Committee members, because they seem to be really willing to put in that time to make it so nice.
But even walking through,
So I thought that she should come to this, they should meet and they should come to the council with whatever recommendations they might have about what they would like to do or what they want Public Works to do. And we could have that conversation.
And what they might need to be ambassadors if they need.
Yes, or
beanies,
yeah, or whatever. I mean, I just think they really care about
Buttons.
it and buttons, right, or something. I don't know. It's a beautiful dog park. People do come from all around. They say it is the nicest one in the state. So
Let's keep it nice.
yeah, we need to keep it nice.
And I believe there is a fine for not picking up after your dog. Is that right? Or is it just off leash? I thought it was also
I don't know. It's an issue, seems to be everywhere, but okay. All right. Is there any other business, Tim? No? Okay. Well, then we will go into executive session when we have a motion, but I'm just announcing, we will not take an action and we will, Paul, I need to just chat with you just for a second, okay? But we will not come back into the meeting. It will be done.
I would like to move.
Yes, you make the motion, please.
But not for my house. I move that the council enter into executive session for the purpose of discussing the appointment, employment, or evaluation of a city employee, specifically the city manager, inviting city manager Jesse Baker into the session with the council.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, so we will move into executive session. Tom, I sent you the materials. Have you received them?
I have them. Thank you.
Okay, good. All right, so we'll see you upstairs or something.
We'll go
That's gonna be
to the senior
upstairs?
center. No, we can go into the.
The